Hello, this is a culture presentation from Ryan Priddy, Colorado Christian University Relational Psychology professor, April 3rd, 2022. Introduction. This is a two-part presentation. The first half I will address these questions. What is web-based social cognition? Explain how culture relates to our perception of others and ourselves. Discuss whether or not these perceptions vary across cultures. The second half of this presentation, I will address these questions. Compare and contrast some key differences between American culture and Latin culture. Has this research changed your perception of previous impressions about this particular culture? First, we'll start with the web-based social cognition definition found in our textbook. The growing use of technology has led to the increasing research exploring the manner in which various social psychological phenomena are enacted in the cyber world. For example, which cues online are used to form initial impressions of each other. So right there, web-based social cognition is attempting to, in place of face-to-face interaction, you're trying to see which are the things that actually persuade you and change your behaviors. The second term is the actual social cognition definition. I just thought it was good to understand what we're talking about. You may be asked why a separate chapter on this social cognition is needed. Consider it potential to significantly affect our responses, future behaviors, and choices. In some instances, our perception can mean the difference between life and death. So here in this quote, it's just really telling you how much of an impact social cognition has on the individual. And web-based cognition is just, obviously it's a newer study to try to figure out what those cues are that are actually changing our behavior. As the definition stated, it's a dramatic effect on the individual's perception and future actions. Explain how culture relates to our perception of others and ourselves. Categorizing things, I quoted our textbook again. I think this is a big one because the mind needs to attempt to categorize to kind of handle the situation and the amount of information, but at times it can also be the detriment of, positive interaction. The process of categorizing thus begins order and efficiency when we perceive others and make our social world more manageable. Note that categorizing one is the most common strategies we use to understand others, and often it happens outside our conscious awareness. Now that's a big one, remember that. While there are benefits to categorizing, significant error can occur with potentially profound negative effects on our assessment of others. So with that being said, culture is the difference in the way in which we live from different regions to different areas. And culture has an emotional pride attached to it. So when you interact with people about things that really mean a lot to them, it can really offend, it can really hurt, it can really break the communication thread. Varying types of perceptions. This is a quote from our YouTube video that we watched, the TED Talk, and I just quoted this, and I'll explain. She took my friend. And she shook him. Then she looked at me and said, "Why is he not interested in what I have to say?" So this was a guide who was doing a tour guide, and these two gentlemen who weren't from there, were from different cultures. They came to listen to this woman, give a guided talk. And the friend he was with didn't use facial expressions, and the guide took that as a negative thing. So in her culture, it was negative. It was perceived to be bad. In his culture, he was really enjoying it and listening. It just, those two things clashed, and that's a direct example of how cultural differences and perceptions can change. I believe that human beings in general need to categorize things, need to understand things, and they have one perception. Seeing that through a different lens is definitely the thing you would like to try to do, but being aware of these things that I think is important. So every human has the ability to do that. So yes, that varies across cultures, I think. Part two of my presentation, is American culture versus the Latin culture. So Latin culture, from some research that I did, personal space and affection. Latin Americans are an affectionate people who love hugged and accompanying with kisses on the cheek with every hello or goodbye. Latinas will get up close and personal when meeting. So Latins are very boisterous. They're very loving people. That's their culture. Now, America could be different because we are a lot of different cultures. So the Western American kind of culture, I guess we'll try to encompass that in, is depending on the state or location you'll get a variety of responses. There could be, New York City, you're liable to get kicked. In Fort Collins, Colorado, for instance, you'll probably get a few bucks in a meal. So we are very affectionate as a culture here in America. We are very cognizant of other people. But I think with the Latin culture, it's a very unique, very small culture that's just who they are. That's a little bit different than I think us here in America. The Latin culture, family play a central role. For this reason, they spend much of their time cultivating and strengthening family ties. In most cases, families either live together or get together frequently. Personally, I have fond memories of my family reunions as a kid with my Mexican grandfather, his siblings, and their multitude of descendants. More often than not, adult children in Latin culture continue to live with their parents for life. So that's a big one. There's a cultural difference there because I don't think the American culture is, I don't know, accepting. It's just not what we do abroad here in the United States. I think for most people, Americans would consider living with your parents as an adult as kind of a failure. I think that's just how the American culture thinks. And and that we promote independence and wealth. And that's just kind of what our culture feels like. Latinos are warm, friendly, and inviting. Even the poorest of Guatemalans, economically speaking, will invite you to a delicious dinner for corn tortillas. In stark contrast, most Americans guard their privacy and enjoy time alone. In the U.S., it's not the norm to visit a person without notifying them. That's absolutely true. That might be the basis of life in society as we get, more technology across the board, but I think that's a big one. Compare and contrast. The United States is a melting pot of culture, therefore it has a combination of cultural identity never before replicated. So we're just talking about the American Western kind of culture. The United States culture is built upon a foundation of freedom to express yourself. We also must be constantly aware of other cultures and views when engaging socially. The most dangerous thing we can do is bring subconscious bias and perceptions to the table. In summary, I have had several eye-opening, perspective-changing experiences in this class so far. Looking at another culture through the lens of relational psychology has shown me the ways in which I have been judgmental of others because of culture, sex, age, etc. The ability to see people through a lens without the ignorance, judgment, or fear of the unknown is key to providing successful chance for positive social engagement. And that's my presentation. Thank you.